passage is not really one that I was very happy reading. Honestly, it was a bit of a pain to read. But once I got through to the questions, they were fairly rewarding. So it looks like a pretty complicated passage, but the questions are very, very simple. So in a situation like this, how are you supposed to decide whether you should do the passage or you shouldn't? Honestly, a bit of it is also dependent on how comfortable you are with whatever you're reading. So if I'm not particularly scared by the philosophy of social sciences, I might give this passage a shot. And at the end of it, I would definitely benefit from it. But on the other hand, if you are the kind who feels that this is not a passage that you will be able to get through at all, then regardless of how easy the questions are, this would not be a good passage for you. So let's get started with this for now, and then I will justify my point of why the questions are simple. So we are starting to talk about the emergence of the philosophy of social sciences, and it says that there are two aspects to this. It is seen as an arena of thought, and it is also seen as a set of social institutions. And these two aspects or characterizations overlap but are not congruent. Congruent means they are not in harmony. After that, we are saying that academic disciplines are social institutions, and after that, we are defining what a social institution is according to the author. According to the author, institutions are all those social entities that organize action. They link individuals into social structures. So think about anything that we normally refer to as a social institution. For example, let's take the family. Now, when you belong to a family, then all the members of that family would probably act in a certain way that tells you that they belong to one family. This is what the sentence refers to, that anything characterized as an institution actually coordinates or links the actions of the individuals who are a part of that institution. So that's how I understood that line. After that, it simply goes into describing various types of institutions, and this is a part that I did not go into too much detail because it's fairly complicated. It says there are various kinds of institutions. The Hegelians and the Marxists emphasize universal institutions such as family, rituals, and so on. Then it says that there are institutions that just kind of spontaneously grew, and then there were other institutions that were created. Nevertheless, after that, the author says that even those institutions that apparently grew spontaneously, today even these are regulated. These are controlled and molded to some extent. So on the whole, we are talking about different types of social institutions. After that, the author says that there are formal institutions, there are informal institutions. There are also domains in which we would find both formal and informal. And then the author gives us certain examples. It says, consider the fact that the stock exchange and the black market are both market institutions, one formal, one not. Then it says that there are many features of the work at the stock exchange that rely on informal agreements. So even within one institution, you could have both formal and informal characteristics. So at the end, we are closing this paragraph by saying that on the whole, institutions are generally mixed. Mixed institutions are the norm. So it's a pretty long paragraph. It defines a social institution and it talks about the different types of institutions. So that in fact is what the topic is, the social institutions and their types. It actually does not go and talk about the philosophy of social sciences as a whole. And then we are defining a social institution by saying that it is something that organizes the actions of the individuals. And then we are saying that there are different types, they are formal, informal, and mixed institutions are in fact the norm. Now, when you go from paragraph 1 to paragraph 2, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect, and it actually took me a while to figure out what the connection is between the three paragraphs. But the first paragraph is generic. It defines what an institution is. It talks about generally how many types there are. But here we are referring to two specific types of institutions, culture and tradition. The first sentence says that it is usual in social thought to treat culture and tradition as different from institutions. They are not considered institutions on their own. The view taken here is different. In other words, the author does not feel that way. Culture and tradition are subsets of institutions. So according to the author, culture and traditions are also institutions. After that, it says that there are different views on what constitutes institutions. Some social scientists have taken all institutions, even purely local ones, to be entities that satisfy basic human needs. Others differed and declared any structure of reciprocal roles and norms and institution. So the view on institution differs for different scientists. So the author is kind of trying to bring about some agreement here by saying, let us straddle all of these versions and present institutions generally. So in general, they are structures that serve to coordinate the actions of individuals. So in the first paragraph also the same thing was being said. So already we should see a theme emerging here. The definition of what a social institution is. It is something that coordinates the actions of individuals, and we discussed the example of a family and how it works there. And then the last sentence says that institutions themselves then have no aims or purpose other than those given to them by actors. So for example, let's think about the family as an institution. Does the family have a very well-defined purpose? The purpose of a particular family would obviously be decided by the family itself. That is what the last sentence says. That other than the purpose given to them by actors, the institution does not have a purpose on its own. Now here the main point actually is very, very simple. All that we're trying to establish is that even though people have differing viewpoints on institutions, we need to consider culture and traditions as subsets of institutions. And there is a general definition that we need to consider. We should generally look upon institutions as structures that coordinate the actions of individuals and therefore have no aims other than those assigned by the individuals themselves. Now let's move on to the third and the last paragraph. In the previous one, we talked about culture and tradition as being institutions, and here we're introducing a new institution, that of language. And we're saying that language, in fact, is pretty important for social life and for science. Of course, just like in the first paragraph, there is formal and informal language, naturally grown or designed. And then we're saying that language are paradigms of institutions, or from another perspective, nested sets of institutions. Now this gets a little complicated, so I'm just going to explain on the whole what is this paragraph trying to say. We're simply trying to establish that language is also an institution, and if you look at it from another perspective, it is not one institution, it is one institution within another, within another, within another. So a nested set of anything is any arrangement in which you have a smaller object embedded in a larger object, then this larger object is part of another larger object, and then it keeps going. So within language, there are many different components which are embedded within larger components. So it's actually a set of institutions rather than a single institution on its own. But again, the main point is pretty simple. Language is an example of an institution, or if you want to say a set of institutions that functions to coordinate human action, because that is the definition of a social institution that we are taking. Now we've reached the end of the passage. If I think about what did I read about overall, what I read about is probably the definition of a social institution, and we talked about different types of social institutions. That's about it. So we should not have any trouble doing a passage recap. In the first paragraph, we said that social institutions organize the actions of individuals and that they come in different varieties, formal, informal, or mixed, and that mixed is the general norm. Then we talked about specific types of social institutions, culture and tradition, which are in fact subsets of institutions. We also said that even though people have differing views, we need to look upon institutions as structures that coordinate the actions of individuals, and that's about it. Then we talked about language as an example of an institution or a set of nested institutions that again functions to coordinate human action, specifically in social life and science. So it's pretty important. So all in all, we have to define what a social institution is in our main idea. So social institutions, including culture, tradition, and language, serve to coordinate the actions of individuals. That's about it. So on the whole, it's a pretty simple passage, unless you get caught up in the details, and then it seems very complicated. Let's go on to the questions. All of the following inferences from the passage are false except. So this is a question with a double negative, false as well as an except. So we will simplify it. Whenever you have a question like this, please convert it to an affirmative statement. It's much easier to process the question then. So instead of saying all of the following are false except, why not look upon it as which of the following are true? So two double negatives make a positive. So now we are going to look for something that we can infer from the passage. That's it. Our first option says institutions like family, rituals, governance, economy, and so on are natural and cannot be consciously modified. But if you look at the text in paragraph 1, it clearly says that in their present incarnations, in their present forms, they are very much the product of conscious attempts to mold and plan them. So they can be modified. So 1 cannot be inferred, we eliminate it. Option 2 says that the institution of friendship cannot be found in the institution of joint stock companies because the first is an informal institution while the second is a formal one. I thought this is a trick option because if you read the first part, you would say, yes, of course, the institution of friendship cannot be found in the institution of joint stock companies. But the thing is that you also have to look at the reason. Why can friendship not be found? Because the first one is an informal institution and the second is a formal one. So what we are implying here is that they cannot be mixed. But again, if you look at the text in paragraph 1, it clearly says that there are some institutions that come in informal and formal variants as well as in mixed ones. So they could have mixed forms also. So option 2 cannot be inferred because we cannot say that just because one is an informal institution and the other is formal, we cannot mix the two. A mixture is always possible, so we eliminate option 2. Option 3 says that the concepts of culture and tradition, or as concepts, culture and tradition have no analytical, explanatory or expository power, especially when they are treated in isolation. In fact, paragraph 2 says that these are analytically isolated for explanatory purposes. The reason that we have actually separated these concepts is in order to explain certain things. So option 3 has been directly contradicted by paragraph 2. Option 4, natural language refers to that stage of language development where no conscious human intent is evident. Natural language is something that does not have any purposeful human action. It's not by human design. And this has been stated in the passage in paragraph 3. Natural languages are typical examples of what Ferguson called the result of human action, but not the execution of human design. Of course, for language to develop, some human action has to be involved, but it is not intentional. Option 4 is confirmed and therefore it's our answer. Now, this is a pretty simple and specific question because we just have to look at the first paragraph and even there, not the entire paragraph. So, we are talking about the two characterizations that are seen as overlapping but not congruent. We use these keywords to locate the relevant text. So, if we look at the first paragraph, it says we begin with the emergence of the philosophy of the social sciences as an arena of thought and as a set of social institutions. So, these are two aspects of the philosophy of social sciences. It is these two characterizations or aspects that overlap but are not congruent. Congruent means harmonious. And after that, it says that academic disciplines are social institutions. So, the arena of thought actually refers to academic disciplines. And what the author is trying to point out is that these two aspects are normally not seen as congruent, but in fact, academic disciplines are social institutions. So, we should not see an arena of thought as separate from social institutions. They should be in harmony. Now, having understood this, or even if we have not understood this, it's fine, we can still solve the question. Option 1 says the philosophy of the social sciences and a set of social institutions. Now, we are actually looking at two aspects of the philosophy of social sciences. So, option 1 cannot be our answer. We have to refer to the two aspects as an arena of thought and as a set of social institutions. This is actually our shadow answer right here. So, option 1 cannot be what we are looking for. Option 2 says academic disciplines and institutions. Of course, institutions is definitely one aspect, but what about academic disciplines? Arena of thought, could it refer to academic disciplines? Yes, it could, because the very next line here says academic disciplines are social institutions. So, perhaps we are referring to the arena of thought. So, it could be option 2, we retain it. Option 3 says an arena of thought and academic disciplines. So, here we have the first phrase, but we don't have the set of social institutions. So, it cannot be option 3. because the arena of thought is kind of equal to an academic discipline. So option 3 is not really referring to two different aspects. We eliminate it. Option 4 says individuals and social structures. Now, social structures possibly could relate to social institutions, but individuals cannot be equated with an arena of thought. So it cannot be option 4. So we eliminate option 4. Option 2 would have to be our answer. So I thought it was a pretty easy question, provided you were not in a hurry. Now here we have to explain the given quote. The quote is, consider the fact that the stock exchange and the black market are both market institutions, one formal, one not. This is clearly an example that has been mentioned in paragraph 1. So we need to always look at what is the point that this example is illustrating. And the point of this example has been highlighted here in bold for you. So when we have to explain this quote, we always need to think about the larger point being made. What we're really trying to say is that some institutions come in both formal and informal variants as well as in mixed ones. And as an example, we are taking the stock exchange and the black market. Let's keep this in mind and evaluate our options. Let's take a look at option 1. Here it says market instruments can be formally traded in the stock exchange and informally traded in the black market. Perhaps this is true. Perhaps this is what happens in real life. Honestly, we can't say because this is not given to us in the passage. So it's not really about the trading of market instruments that we're referring to. We're actually trying to say that within the market, we could have formal, informal, and mixed institutions. So option 1 is not really the proper explanation. We eliminate it. Option 2 says the stock exchange and the black market are examples of how within the same domain, different kinds of institutions can coexist. That is exactly what the highlighted part is saying. So we should retain option 2. Option 3 says that the stock exchange and the black market are both dependent on the market to survive. Again, regardless of whether this is true or not, this is not the explanation or the larger point that the example is making. So option 3 should be eliminated. Option 4 says the stock exchange and the black market are both organized to function by rules. Perhaps there are certain informal rules or formal ones. That's not again going to relate to the larger point being made by the example given here. So option 4 should be eliminated. What we need to keep in mind is whenever it asks us to explain why a particular example has been used, a lot of times the function or the main point is mentioned somewhere around that example. So instead of looking everywhere in the passage, start with the example, look at the sentence before it and after it and see if you can find your answer there. And that's exactly what we have done. So it's a pretty simple question. Our answer is definitely 2 because it's explicitly stated for us in paragraph 1. Now we have an essence of the passage, nothing but the main idea that we are looking for. Now this question should be easy for us because we've already done a passage recap and we've already figured out the main idea. So let's take a look at that now. The passage overall talks about different types of social institutions and also defines a social institution as something that serves to coordinate the actions of individuals. That's it. That's the whole story. Let's take a look at our options. Now, option 1 I can see is pretty limited because it only talks about language, which is only one of the institutions that the passage has dealt with. So this cannot be the main or the essence of the passage. So we eliminate it. Option 2 says institutions are structures that serve to coordinate the actions of individuals. The same story has been repeated across paragraphs. It is also a shadow answer. So we should retain option 2. It's actually a pretty good option. Option 3 says it is usual in social thought to treat culture and tradition as different from institutions. This is true. It is mentioned in the passage. But again, this is just one point in the entire passage. The whole passage is not about culture and tradition. It is about social institutions in general. So option 3 cannot be the essence of the text or the passage in this case. Option 4 says the stock exchange and the black market are both market institutions. Pretty easy to eliminate because these are just examples that have been mentioned, cannot be the essence of the passage. So option 2 is definitely our answer. A very, very simple question. So this is how I decided that if you got through the tedious passage, you would actually feel rewarded because the questions are pretty simple. A lot of the answers are explicitly given to you. So it's possible, in fact, to get all 4 questions correct for this passage.